Hello and welcome back to Common Knowledge, the show where I take a look at Magic the Gathering commons and tell you, are they any good in the Pauper format or not? Most of them are not. Some of them are pretty good. And we've had a pretty decent streak of at least one really good card in the last handful of episodes. So if Scryfall wants to help us out here, there we go. Restrain is 2 and a white for an instant. Prevent all combat damage that will be dealt by target attacking not creatures. Target attacking creature this turn, and you draw a card. Yeah, if this was a fog effect that had a draw on it, that was a cantrip, I would go, yeah, all day long. Let's play this. 3 mana would not be that bad to draw a card and fog. I'm into it. When it fogs a single creature, no. No, not in Pauper. I mean, you'll find some big creatures in Pauper. You know, I always say Tolarian Terror, but your Gurmag Anglers, Ulamog's Crusher, I suppose, if you're going to go for something really big. Your Annoyed Altasaurs, your Writhing Chrysalis can get really big eventually. And blanking out a creature is nice, and drawing a card is nice, but for this much mana, you really need to fog the whole board. White should be able to do that, and maybe it wouldn't do that in Invasion, but it should be able to do that generally. Yeah, this is so close to a good card, but it's just not quite there. I think I'm going to give it a 2.6, and that's mostly because of the drawn card. Almost exclusively because of the drawn card. Let's move on to the next one. Hey, we got a Braid. A Braid, that is a good Magic card. 1 and a red for an instant. You choose one. A Braid deals 3 damage to target creature, or you destroy target artifact. What a great sideboard piece. This is in Standard right now, right? This is in Standard. Yeah, it's in Foundations. Yeah, just an uncommon there. And it's great. It's a solid piece for Standard. And you know what? It's not that terrible in Pauper either. I think you'll find a lot of people like Suplex instead, which is a sorcery, but that does 3 damage to a creature, or it exiles target artifact. And being able to exile an artifact means you can get rid of those pesky bridges, the artifact indestructible lands. And that makes a real difference. Braid won't do anything to those. And I think it's not that it takes a Braid out of playability. It just makes it a much less desirable option than Suplex, than your other cards that do similar effects as well. What's the other one I'm thinking? Cast into the Fire is another one that can exile artifacts or deal 1 damage to up to 2 target creatures, I think. So Cast in the Fire is also used quite a bit. It just kind of makes a Braid, like I said, less desirable. Not that it's not good, but it's just less desirable. So I'm going to give this a solid 5. I think this is Pauper playable, but we have just slightly better options in lots of different directions. But you know what? Still really good card. Braid's a real classic. When did a Braid first come out? I honestly have no idea. I don't think it's pre-modern, is it? No. It's what is this? I was not playing here. Hour of Devastation. Yeah, okay. Okay, that makes some sense. What do we have next? Amoeboid Changeling. Here we go. Amoeboid Changeling is 1 and a blue for a shapeshifter. It's a 1/1, and it's got Changeling, which means it is every creature type. You can tap Amoeboid Changeling to give target creature all creature types until end of turn. Or you can tap it to give target creature no creature types. It loses all creature types until end of turn. Originally from Lorwyn. Wow, this is a $170 from Lorwyn. That's crazy. That's crazy that card costs that much. That's just common from Lorwyn. Man, we're back in Lorwyn now. It's so nice, and I miss Changelings, and I'm so glad they're back. And Amoeboid Changeling's a really fun one. Being able to give a creature all creature types is pretty useful, and you can do lots of silly, weird things with that. And then also taking away creature types can be useful as well. There's Oh, what is it called? Is it power word kill? Is that right? Is this the one I'm thinking of? Maybe it's not. Yeah, yeah. So you have a Meat Boy changing out, and this is just a 2 mana instant kill spell in black, but angels, demons, devils, dragons. I wouldn't say they're the most common forms, and this isn't playable in Pauper either. But there's a Pauper one. It's like not zombies and not vampires. What are these other conditional ones that I'm thinking of? Anyway, it doesn't really matter. But there is a Pauper playable, or not Pauper playable exactly, but a Pauper legal kill spell that says destroy like non-zombie, non-werewolf, non-vampire, something to that effect. And there's a lot of zombies in Pauper. But what if this guy could make that creature definitely not a zombie and not anything? Then that becomes a pretty good spell. There's lots of silly things that you can do. Put it if this somebody has like an official slivers thing, and you could put this in slivers if you wanted to, and even have a creature that's not a sliver get all the fun sliver stuff. I like Amoeboid Changeling quite a bit. It's a really fun card. I think it's fun in Commander too, where you can do even sillier dumb stuff with it. I don't know if it's necessarily Pauper playable. It's maybe it's Pauper fun times. You could make a real silly deck in Pauper that uses this guy to pretty decent effect probably. I'm trying to think. What else can you screw over? You can't really screw over elves because those usually count all the elves on the table, and so just blanking one elf isn't a big deal. And also, this guy counts as an elf, so it actually is harming you in that way. I'm not thinking of anything off the top of my head, but maybe stuff with goblins. Anyway, Amiibo Changeling's cool. I'll give it. I'm gonna give it a 3 because I think there's cool stuff that you can do with it. I can't think of all the cool stuff off the top of my head, but look at him. Look at him. He deserves a 3. He's been out here doing stuff. What's our next card? It's Supply Drop. For 3 mana, you get an artifact that has flash. And when this artifact enters, target creature you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. You can pay 4 and tap and sack this artifact to draw a card. Yeah. This just costs too much, right? Think of all the artifacts that you can drop that have some kind of ETB trigger and then can sacrifice to draw a card, or draw a card when they come in and then they sacrifice to do something else. Lembas I would play over this, and Eager Wellspring you play over this, and there's just so many options. All the chromatic stuff, Chromatic Sphere, Chromatic Star. There's just those all basically do this, but kind of better. The +2/+2 at flash speed. At flash speed it's interesting. It is a combat trick in that way, and you can do fun combat trick stuff with it. But it's also 3 mana, and that's asking a little bit. I think if this would need to be cheaper all the way around. If it was 2 mana to put this out at flash speed, and maybe it only gave +1/+1. And then maybe the draw effect was also a little cheaper, maybe this would be closer to playable. But the way it is now, it's a little costly, and I don't think you get enough effect out of it. So I'm going to give it a relatively disappointing 1.7 and keep moving on. Our next card, we've had this one before, but I do love this card quite a bit. It's Planar Incision. It's actually one of my favorite Pauper cards. Nobody really plays this card, and it's so good. People should play this card. Anyway, we'll skip this one, but play Planar Incision. Love it. Jace's Scrutiny is 1 and a blue for an instant. Target creature gets -4, -0, or -4, -0, whatever, until end of turn, and you investigate. Okay, blue does this a lot, where they take down the power of a creature and save you in that way. I like that it makes a clue token. That's all right, but for the most part, the effects, the cards that use this effect that get played in Pauper are the flash creatures. There's an elder, something elder in Tarkir Dragonstorm, and there was another card before that, and I can't remember the name of it. And they would come in and they would give a creature -3/-0 until end of turn. But it was also, a flash creature. So you brought it in, especially for like fairies decks. You'd sometimes play those, and you could blank a creature, and then you'd have a guy up at flash speed that you could attack the next turn and ninjutsu out, and then use it again if you needed to. So there's lots of useful things when that effect is on a creature. I think it's a lot less interesting when it's on an instant. And I'd really want to see this do it to multiple creatures. If this did it to at least 2 creatures, but if it could do it to all creatures, that would be more ideal. The investigate. You know what? You can't take away the clue token. That is a big deal as well. But this being on an instant, I'm just not as interested in it. And I think the score should kind of match that. It's still okay though. I'm gonna give it. I'm gonna give it a 2.9. I think there's value there. Just not exactly what I'm looking for. Witch's Web is 1 and a green for an instant. Target creature gets +3/+3 and gains reach until end of turn, and you untap it. That's actually a decent amount of stats for a combat trick. Yes, we can go back. Giant Growth is +3/+3 for a single mana, but +3/+3 and the reach and the untap. That's a pretty juicy combat trick. That is really tricksy to be able to have kind of pseudo vigilance on a creature. Your creature's tapped down, and your opponent thinks they can swing in freely, and then you hit them with this. That's pretty cool. And even if you use this on offense, which you could very easily use this on offense and really give it pseudo vigilance. Your opponent blocks, you play this, you get to untap your creature so it can block again on the opponent's turn, but you get to blow out the opponent's creature that way. That's all pretty good stuff. The reach isn't relevant at that point, but this is okay. If you like combat tricks, if you play with combat tricks, and not a ton of people do, this is a good one. This is a pretty good one. I'm going to give this a pretty good score as well. I'm going to give this a 4. I really think it deserves it. I think this is the right price and gives you the right amount of stats. It's creepy as hell, but it at least gives you a decent amount of stats. And you know what? I bet it's even creepier when it's in black and white. Yeah. I think it's maybe a little creepier that way. Anyway, let's keep moving along to Glass Dust Hulk. For 3 and Azorius, that is a white and a blue, you get a 3/4 artifact creature that is a golem. Whenever another artifact you control enters, this creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn and can't be blocked this turn. And it also cycles for an Azorius hybrid, so you can pay white or blue, discard that card to draw a card. That's not bad. That's really not that bad. 5 mana for a 3/4 is asking a lot, that for sure. I'm not here to try to sell you on a 5 mana 3/4, but if you're in a dedicated artifact deck, you can probably get this to be pumped once, twice, 3 times in a turn, and then you've got a pretty good attacker, and he's unblocked. I don't mind it. I have not seen this be played at all. I'm a big Golem fan. I didn't even know this card was a thing. I wasn't playing during Shards. I think Shards actually was the first set where I kind of stopped playing Magic, because wasn't that right after original Lorwyn, and I was pretty much done at that point. I kind of like it. I'm gonna write it down because I think I want some copies of this guy just to have them. Maybe not necessarily to make a deck, but cool card. In terms of what you rate it, I'm going to give this a 4.7. I think it's right on the cusp of playable. If you get to I think if you have like maybe a more controlling style of game, which is not necessarily what Affinity artifact heavy decks do. But I think if you can play more control-y because you're in Azorius, maybe you have that option. You can play. There's like there's like an Ixalan card that's about like stalactites or icy cave kind of thing, and that can tap a creature down and maybe give it a stun counter. Cryogen relics obviously are really useful with something like this. There's probably something you could do around an Azorius kind of control-y artifact build that uses this guy effectively. You bring Ornithopters and your Frogmites and your Mirror Enforcers in, and you can dump them all down on a single turn, and this guy gets a big buff, and then he swings in unblockable. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. 4.7. I think it's worth it. Introduction to Prophecy is 3 mana for a sorcery that is a lesson. You scry 2, and then you draw a card. That is that's not very good. Now it's good because it's colorless, and so any deck could play this. But what is this? This is just is this a Serum Visions? Is that what a Serum Visions does? Draw cards, cry 2. I missed. That's a preordain. It's a preordain, isn't it? Preordain. Scry 2, then draw a card. Yep. So preordain, single blue mana, you get to do that same effect. That's pretty good. 3 mana though, it's much less interesting. It is a lesson, so you can learn shenanigans to go find this card specifically. But are you going to go find this card that just kind of fixes your draw and then gives you a card? I think if you're going to go for a lesson, you want to find a little bit more of an impactful lesson. I don't particularly like this, and I'm not going to give it a great score. I'm going to end up giving it a 2, I guess. It probably should deserve even less. Let's go like 1.9. But I'm not a big fan. If you want to play that effect, just kind of play Preordain or Serum Visions. I would play Serum Visions before I play this. Scourge of the Nobilis is 2 and a hybrid Boros, so a red or a white. For an enchantment aura that enchants a creature, as long as enchanted creature is red, it gets +1/+1 and has, for a Boros hybrid mana, this creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn. We call that fire breathing in the biz. And as long as enchanted creature is white, it gets +1/+1 and has lifelink. Interesting. So you get a Boros creature, a red and white creature, and this thing gets +2/+2 and lifelink, and potentially even more than that. It's not too bad. I mean, I think this is a cycle from. I mean, I know this one's from Eventide. Are they all from Eventide, or maybe some are from Shadowmoor, maybe even Lorwyn as well? But and Morningtide, I suppose too. But I think the green and blue one's pretty good. I think the green and white one's pretty good. And those give things like indestructible and maybe even hexproof and things like that. And those are pretty good abilities. I think +2/+2 and lifelink for 3 mana, and then the option to spend more mana to do the fire breathing effect is okay. But I don't think it's quite good enough. Three mana for the initial putting it down. I don't particularly love it. You could play Squeeze Embrace instead if you're in Boros. I think Squeeze Embrace. Let's take a look at that one just real quick. Squeeze Embrace. Yeah, see, Squeeze Embrace, 2 mana, and yeah, you have to specifically have the red and the white, but if you're in Boros, you probably have that. And it's an enchantment that gives the +2/+2, and then it gives your creature the ability to come back when it dies. So that's pretty decent value. I think that's generally just better than Scourge of the Nobilis, and as a person who has a Boros modifications kind of deck, I've never really considered this card, and I've got copies of Squeeze and Brace in a testing, like not a sideboard exactly, but kind of like, oh, you should test these cards out and try them. But even Squeeze and Brace is not one I'm really main decking, and so I don't think this really shows up at all. Let's go with something like a 2.8. I think 2.8 is a fair score for something like that. Let's keep going. Faravor is 2 and a red for a 2/2 beast. You can pay a red and sacrifice an artifact, and this creature gets +3/+0 until end of turn. That's a pretty good boost to stats. It's still pretty fragile though, only having 2 toughness, so it's more of like a combat trick kind of thing, maybe even something that you play on defense of, scaring an opponent, daring them to attack, or you attack in and dare them to block, and knowing that you can keep boosting up your creature to make it trade. It's interesting. 3 mana for a 2/2 isn't amazing. Obviously, we have lots of cheaper grizzly bears out there, but I don't hate this effect. It might just be a little slow for Pauper. Having to get all that stuff out. Yeah, you know what? Actually, it'd be pretty cool with something like Experimental Synthesizer. You play the synthesizer, you're able to get cheap cards off the top, and then you can sacrifice the synthesizer to this, get a nice little boost, get another card. That's some cool advantage that you can take. The only problem is that with this thing costing 3, if you have more than one copy in your deck, and you probably should, if you're going to try to play this card, you'd want to have multiple copies. That's not the card you really want to show up off of Experimental Synthesizer, because 3 mana is asking maybe a little bit too much for something that you impulse like that. Still, I can see the usage, and I kind of like what it's doing. If you're in red, there's probably plenty of ways to give this thing first strike, and then it becomes a little bit more interesting. I don't know. I'm kind of coming around on it. I think this is a cool card, if nothing else, and I'm gonna give it. Let's give it a 4.1. Yeah, I think this thing is honestly pretty damn good. Final card of the day is Transcendent Envoy. For 1 and a white, you get a 1/2 enchantment creature that is a griffin. It has flying, and aura spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Interesting card. Obviously, a commander card. If you've, it can be a commander card, and can be very effective in commander if you are playing something that is playing with a lot of auras. And there are decks that do that for sure. I've got 2 different commander decks that do that. I don't know if this guy's in either of them, honestly, though. Maybe he's in one. I think he might be in one of the decks. In Pauper, though, there's really only 1 or 2 decks that might play this. One is Mono White Heroic, and one is Bogles, Selesnya Bogles. And I don't think either of them really do. Because this guy, while he makes your auras cheaper, he's not necessarily the greatest guy to put your auras onto, because he's still very squishy. In maybe more in Mono White Heroic he can work, but in Bogles you have the Bogles. This guy doesn't bogue. He doesn't bogle. So without having hexproof on him, he's just going to get blown out like all the other creatures could. That's why you play the Bogles, so they can take all the enchantments and not worry about getting destroyed. And in Mono White Heroic, you're not only using auras, you're using things that just target creatures, so you can use instants and some artifacts and some other things like that can target creatures, and that's how you get the heroic trigger. And they aren't always going to be auras, so you'd probably have to change your heroic deck to be more aura based if you're using this guy. And that's not necessarily going to make your deck better. In fact, it might make it a whole lot worse by trying to fit this guy in. So I think you could. I certainly think you could, and I think that could be effective. You can get some wins with a card like this in a strategy like that. But I think the current Mono White Heroic strategy is probably the better one, having a little bit better access to counterplay and instant speed stuff, gives you a handful more options that I think are pretty useful that you want to play in that deck. So I'm going to give this guy still a respectable score. It's a good effect. Let's give it a. I'm going to give it a 5, straight 5. Playable in Pauper. One more bonus card, and then we'll call it a day. It's Elvish Visionary. What a classic. Classic card here. Elvish Visionary is 1 and a green for a 1/1 Elf Shaman. When this creature enters, you draw a card. We've seen a lot of cards like this, in Standard right now. There's a Helpful Hunter, which is the one in a white cat. That's a 1/1 that draws a card when it enters. We've seen Spirited Companion from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. That's an enchantment dog that when it comes into play, you draw a card. That's a 1/1. So we've definitely seen these kinds of cards before. Does green need this as much? Maybe not as much, but it's still pretty effective there. I think Elvish Visionary is a solid card. You wouldn't really play it in the elf deck because you just have better elves to play with, but I think you could probably find ways of doing broken stuff with this in green. Let's go ahead and give this like a 5.2. Yeah. If anything, 2 mana to draw a card and get a body to block is not too bad. Not too bad. Yeah, I like that score. Let's go with that, and let's call it a day. Thanks for joining me. We'll catch you next time.